When we think of gunpowder transforming warfare, we often jump to the cannons of the Renaissance or the muskets of early modern Europe. But long before those battles, a group of radical Czech rebels, farmers, craftsmen, and religious reformers fought off Europe's most powerful armies using gunpowder weapons in ways no one had seen before. The Hussite Wars, fought from 1419 to 1434, weren't just a religious revolt. They were the world's first large-scale conflicts where gunpowder weapons fundamentally altered battlefield tactics and history itself. The Hussite Wars began not with an army, but with a sermon. Jan Hus, a Czech priest and philosopher, preached against the corruption of the Catholic Church, criticizing the sale of indulgences and calling for reform decades before Martin Luther. His teachings gained traction among Czechs, who felt oppressed by both religious and imperial elites. In 1415, Hus was lured to the Council of Constance under a promise of safe conduct, only to be arrested and burned at the stake for heresy. His execution ignited a national and religious uprising in Bohemia, now modern-day Czechia. This wasn't just a theological dispute, it was a social revolution. Bohemia exploded into rebellion. Nobles, townspeople, and peasants rallied around the banner of the Hussites, demanding not just religious reform, but national sovereignty. At the heart of the movement was the demand for the 4 Articles of Prague, which included communion in both kinds, freedom to preach clergy poverty, and the punishment of public sins regardless of status. This fusion of religious zeal and proto-nationalism alarmed both the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire. In response, a series of crusades, yes, actual crusades, were launched against the Hussite rebels by the church. Enter Jan Zizka, a one-eyed veteran of earlier wars, who became the most feared commander of the Hussite forces. Zizka realized that his mostly peasant army couldn't match traditional feudal knights in open field battle. So he invented something revolutionary: mobile fortresses known as war wagons. These were heavily reinforced carts, armed with small cannons, handgunners, crossbowmen, and spearmen. They could be linked together into circular formations to repel cavalry. In essence, Zizka created the first combined arms mobile artillery platform in history, using commoners, not nobles, as the backbone. Gunpowder had been used before primitive cannons had appeared in Europe by the late 1300s, but never like this. The Hussites pioneered the tactical integration of gunpowder weapons on the battlefield. Small hand cannons and larger wagon-mounted cannons allowed Hussite forces to break up nightly charges before they ever reached melee range. Gunpowder gave peasants stopping power against the heavily armored elite. And it wasn't just technological, it was psychological. The thunderous noise and smoke disoriented enemy troops who had never faced such weapons in mass. Zizka's brilliance lay in his ability to combine terrain, technology, and morale. His forces used hills, forests, and rivers to trap crusading knights and nullify their advantage. The war wagons would be placed on high ground or in narrow passes, with gunners behind and pikemen ready to counter any breakthrough. Repeated papal crusades, 5 in total, were launched against the Hussites, and each time they failed. In battle after battle, most famously at Sudomir, Vitkov Hill, and Lipany, the Hussite forces inflicted devastating defeats on larger, better-equipped enemies. It was a humiliation for the church and the empire. Despite their military success, the Hussites were not unified. Over time, they split into 2 main factions: the moderate Utraquists and the radical Taborites. The Taborites wanted full societal revolution, a kind of proto-communist theocracy, while the Utraquists sought compromise with Catholic authorities. This division would eventually lead to civil war within the Hussite movement itself. After Zizka's death in 1424, leadership passed to less capable hands and internal tensions mounted. The final turning point came in 1434 at the Battle of Lipany, when the moderate Utraquists allied with Catholic forces to defeat the radical Taborites. The battle was both a betrayal and a conclusion. It marked the end of the radical Hussite movement, but also cemented a compromise. The Utraquists were granted limited religious concessions, making Bohemia one of the first places in Europe to legally allow a non-Catholic form of Christianity. The war ended, but its impact echoed far beyond Bohemia's borders. The Hussite Wars marked the true dawn of gunpowder as a decisive force in European warfare. While later armies would refine and expand on these methods, the Hussites were the first to show that handheld firearms and battlefield artillery could break the feudal monopoly on violence. Their innovations directly influenced later military developments, including the rise of professional armies, mobile artillery, and combined arms doctrine. In many ways, the Hussite Wars were the blueprint for modern warfare. The Hussite legacy isn't only military. They laid the ideological groundwork for the Protestant Reformation a century later. Jan Hus became a martyr for religious dissent, and Bohemia's resistance proved that church authority could be resisted not just in pamphlets, but on the battlefield. The wars also sparked early discussions of national identity, class equality, and religious pluralism. Though their revolution was crushed, the Hussites forced the medieval world to confront the possibility of change from below. The Hussite Wars were more than a medieval rebellion. They were a transformational moment in both military and religious history. They proved that a committed, disciplined force armed with new technology and a radical idea could stand against the greatest powers of the time. Gunpowder gave them the tools, but it was belief fierce, uncompromising, and revolutionary that made the Hussites a force the world could not ignore. Before the Reformation, before the gunpowder empires, there were the Hussites.